Okay, welcome everyone to our Boots on the Ground series. I'm Nancy North, Fishers and Farmers Communications and Outreach Lead, and your host today. I'm here today with my co-host Amy Smith. Our Boots on the Ground series is a program of Fishers and Farmers. We're a national fish habitat partnership. And our goal is to respectfully connect farmers and landowners, scientists, and all collaborators to listen and learn from each other and work together for farms, fish, and streams. In addition to this program, we fund local projects, we host workshops, we cultivate a network to share knowledge and achieve farm and watershed goals. And we co-produce Fishers and Farmers Neighbor to Neighbor, a half-hour radio program and podcast. Our featured guests today are founders of the Peno Creek Cooperative Partnership in Northeast Missouri.
This farm that we're on was owned by Sandy's dad. We moved here in 1976 after I graduated from college. Sandy's dad was getting to the point he was getting a little older and was wanting some help on the farm. He was kind of wanting to semi-retire. We formed a partnership, and we've been here ever since. It's been 40-some years. We've grown it into more of a diversified grain operation. We still run 200 and some head of beef cows, but we're running about 3,000 acres of row crop now. I've always grew up, taking care of the soil and taking care of the farm. We had limited acres at home, so we tried to utilize as much as we could out of all the acres. So I guess I kind of grew up with the idea of getting as much as you can out of what you got and taking care of it.
In 2012, we had a real bad drought. We had a field across the highway that we had in corn.
Corn wasn't going to make anything, so we cut it for silage. So we wanted something to put on that ground to get some more forage for the cows. So we put cereal rye on that ground, and just so happened that we had a good rain, and we got a good stand, and we ended up getting a lot of forage off there for the cattle that fall, and then turned around and baled it the next spring and got like 8 or 9 bales an acre of haylage off of it, and then turned around and planted it in the soybeans, and the soybeans made 50 bushel. And I said, goodness, if you can get this kind of turnaround on your ground, get that much forage for the cattle, and still keep the erosion down, this is something to this. So that's kind of how it started, and we've been building on it ever since.
I know when he first started doing this cover crops, I'm like, you're planting radishes? You're doing what? You're planting peas and all these things. I'm like, what are you doing? And so then he started explaining, and we were pulling radishes up, and these big long, radishes, and how they start breaking down, and so you see a lot of benefits from it.
I guess basically when I did start, erosion was my main concern. I wanted to stop the erosion, but the soil health and what's going on underneath the ground seems to be as important as what's above the ground, with the soil health of your microorganisms, your earthworms and stuff that breaks down your soil. I think you got probably as much or more going on below the ground as you do above the ground. And I guess another thing that's kind of got me more involved in it was this Peno Creek watershed. Chris Williamson's a local fish biologist out of Hannibal, and he approached me about the same time. They had picked out some of the more pristine watersheds in the state, and they wanted to develop a program to keep these watersheds in the shape they was in and build and protect them. So he wanted to know if I'd be interested in helping organize a little farmer-led watershed group. And so I agreed to, and Curtis was interested, and he also agreed to, and maybe a half dozen farmers or so, landowners tried it, and now that's evolved into, I think last year we had 40 landowners with over 2,000 acres. So the program has been successful, and that kind of spurred my interest more.
We have a big responsibility as an operator of the land. It's not our land. We use it. We're we're immersed in the different programs through the Conservation Department, NRCS, only to try to better the acres. I'm a big believer in maximizing each acre and not growing. I see no point to be a 10,000 acre farmer if I can't manage to the fullest 1 acre. So that's my mission now, is to what I have, make the full use out of it. That way I can pass it down and it be absolutely perfect to the next generation.
It wasn't until I got older and moved back and really dove into farming and what farming is all about that I could truly see all that he does every day to make sure that he's improving the land and make sure that he is doing what's right for his animals, you know, the crops, the ground, his family. He's really a good role model for Curtis and I as we get deeper and deeper into the farming operation. To know what we need to be doing, what we should be doing, and we can kind of take what he's already been doing and take it a step further. So that's kind of exciting to see.
The land that we have is, there's no way to replace it. I mean, you can help it or you can hurt it, you know, and I feel it's our responsibility to make it better than what it was when we got it. I guess that's my overall goal. It always has been. I have 4 children and 14 grandchildren, and you know, hopefully out of those 14 grandchildren, there's going to be somebody that's going to want to come back to the farm for the 4th or 5th generation. And you know, I'd like to leave a legacy of something that they can come back to if they want.
The video you just saw was created when the Scherder family and Scherder Farms received the Missouri Leopold Conservation Award a few years ago. It's a really warm introduction to the kind of work that's being done in Peno Creek watershed. And now we get to talk with John and Curtis, and I think and move more into the story. This story is really about how the work the Scherders are doing came together with some of the goals and the hard work of Missouri Conservation and others in the watershed. So our agenda today as we move forward, now that you've had a look at the watershed, is we'll have a half-hour conversation with our guests. We'll move into the breakout groups for 10 minutes, do a short report out, and then at 2 o'clock, there'll be a half hour of open Q&A so you can ask your questions directly to this group. So let's meet our featured guests. First, introducing Curtis Delgman and John Scherder. And Sandy may pop in and out of their frame as well. All have worked really hard in this effort. The Scherders farm 3,500 acres south of Hannibal, Missouri. And they raise beef cattle, corn, soybeans, wheat, hay, and they've integrated cover crops and innovative seeding methods, crop rotations, managed grazing, grass waterways, terraces, sediment basin structures into their systems, and just keep working on farm and soil health. They were also part of our initial year of Fishers and Farmers workshops in our pilot program, and have been at every workshop we've had, sharing their story with other people and always curious. So welcome, Curtis and John. We also have Chris Williamson. Chris is a fisheries biologist with Missouri Department of Conservation. He loves spending time outdoors, and he loves to explain complex natural resources issues to people, to landowners particularly. Chris, for the last 16 years, has helped landowners improve their land, and he recently became the person overseeing community and private lands in 8 Northeast Missouri counties. Welcome, Chris. And our final guest is Sherry Fisher. Sherry's worked for Missouri Department of Conservation for over 30 years. She has a background in aquatics, and stream and watershed projects are her passion. Sherry is a member of the Fishers and Farmers Steering Committee, and she believes that the kind of relationships we're building and locally and across this basin are the future of progress in achieving the goals that we're all here to talk about. Welcome, Sherry. Just a little intro here before we launch into questions. These folks that you're meeting today took on new work for Peno Creek about the same time. You saw that in the video. The Scherders were doing things on their land, and at the same time, the Department of Conservation made a priority choice and chose to focus on Peno Creek. So now we're going to hear how their work came together, revved up, grew. And you're also going to hear that kind of around the time of the pandemic, things came to more of a pause. They slowed down a bit, and that's part of our focus today. So if you can, as you listen today, grab a piece of paper now, grab a pencil, and I'd like you to put 3 columns on that paper. Featured guests, you don't have to do this, but everybody else. So in those columns, I want you to jot things you hear as you listen today. So in column 1, it'll be what they did to grow the work. So just as you hear things, jot down what specifically did they do to grow the work. And in the middle column, jot down things that slowed them down, like what happened to change the momentum. Any little thing, big thing, little thing. And then we'll work on column 3 later in the breakout groups. That'll be our work. So if you have questions as we're talking in this interview, you're welcome to put them in chat and we'll address them later at the end. So that's an option too. Okay, Chris, I have a question for you to start. You know, we all heard John explain how he moved into cover crop use in the video, and that was you know, a beginning of an evolution of sorts. And about the same time, you ended up with a new challenge, kind of put in your lap because of the priorities of your organization. Will you just tell us briefly what you were asked to do and what you did to kind of move forward with that?
Sure, Nancy. Yeah, so the Conservation Department's been around for 85 years and always with the goal of conserving our fish forest and wildlife resources across the state. We roughly have 200 species of fish in Missouri. And the question was asked, you know, that number of species keeps getting smaller over the decades. What's it going to take for 100 years from now for there to remain 200 species of fish in the state? So we started looking at what we're doing, and typically the way conservation works, we spend a lot of time working on our bad areas, our areas that are heavily impacted, trying to make some difference. At maybe some of the expense of the work that we've done in our higher quality areas. And so when we stepped back and looked at what we were doing across the state, what's it going to take to maintain 200 species of fish over the next 100 years, we realized we need to spend some time in our higher quality areas. And so we did a long process of trying to identify those areas through different analysis using a lot of data we've collected over the years. And in Northeast Missouri, Peno Creek was one of those areas that is still a high quality stream system. You know, about 45 species of fish in it, good mussel populations. And so this is one of the areas in our region that we thought, okay, we can do some work in it. Then the question was asked, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to make sure that the watershed maintains its high quality nature that it's already in? So there really wasn't a plan or a recipe to do this kind of work. It was like, okay, try to figure out what we're going to do. Well, and at the time we didn't have, we've been doing the same best management practices and terraces and different work with landowners for a long time. We didn't really have anything new or a new technique or anything new that we were going to do. So, I sat down with my colleagues in NRCS and our Soil and Water District and kind of pitched them the idea of, here's what we want to do, or here's what the end goal is maintain the high quality watershed, but we didn't really know how, or didn't know what we were going to sell or what we're going to do. So we came with the idea of getting some landowners together, presenting the data that we had. We'd done some sampling. We kind of saw a few issues in the watershed, and it's the same old stuff, you know, excess nutrients and excess sediment in the streams. So we sat down with about a group of 20 landowners and fed them dinner, presented some ideas, and just had a general conversation. Not a lot of telling them what we want to do, more of asking them, here's some of the things we see. What are your guys' thoughts about it? Are you guys seeing the same thing, or are you seeing stuff that we're missing? Just trying to get some of that local knowledge, guys, that or folks that work on the farm that see the stream every day. You know, what are they seeing? What do they want to do? So out of that meeting, you know, different people spoke up for different things, but cover crops was one of the issues that was just piquing some interest at that time. John had started playing with them a little bit. A few other folks had started using them. So we kind of gravitated towards that at the beginning. But from that larger group, then we selected a few people and kind of formed the cooperative partnership group and bounce ideas, you know, a lot more intensively off that small group. And the project just kind of built itself from there, you know, by listening and looking at what the landowners wanted to do, what the producers wanted to do, instead of trying to come up with something on my own and trying to sell it. I think we were much more effective just by listening and developing solutions together.
Thanks, Chris. It sounds pretty smooth when you tell about it. And I'm just wondering, when you had that meeting, you know, you didn't usually host meetings like that, did you? Or you went in without a plan to propose? Can you just, how'd that feel?
Yeah, so it was very nerve-wracking. I'm not gonna lie. You know, you go to college, you take all the classes and all the science background and some public speaking and things, but you know, no background in marketing or any social science besides the basics. So you go into this meeting hoping for an outcome and having no idea which way the conversation is going to lead. If anybody, you know, if it might just be 20 people staring back at you, crickets. Luckily, we didn't have that. And so it was very nerve wracking. I had some really good help with, you know, some really good landowners to help me, some really good agency partners that helped fill in some of the gaps and some of the stuff. And it really worked well. So it was quite the experience. I'm glad I did it, man. That first night, though, I was pretty wound up. So,
Curtis and John, were you at that first meeting that Chris is talking about?
Yes, we were.
Why was it important for you to be there? Why did you want to be there?
Well, he said he was talking about the Peno watershed, which we have quite a bit of property in the Peno watershed, and a lot of it was on the video, which was our surrounding property around that. We are very proud of that ground, and we'd like to keep that stream. Our kids spend countless hours down at that creek, you know, playing and fishing and whatever year round. And, you know, it's very important to us to keep that watershed just as good or better than it has. So that was our interest, plus just the conservation part of it with the erosion and the cover crops. Like Chris said, I was just getting into the cover crop and was really looking for maybe a little more information, you know, and to expand on that. So it kind of worked in what we was really wanting to do anyway.
Yeah. Were the landowners pretty much in agreement about what you wanted to focus on when you started that night? Do you remember?
There were lots of different ideas because we talked about a whole range of things, from ag issues to a landfill. There was some questions about a landfill that's in the watershed. So the questions and some of the issues that are brought up ranged to, you know, a wide gamut of issues. But the cover crops was one that continued to come up. We had, you know, the room was tilted towards ag producers. And so, you know, that was the driving force of it. But there was a wide range of issues brought up.
Mm-hmm. So you had that first meeting and made a decision on focus, but then you brought together a smaller group of which you were part, right, John?
Yes, ma'am.
So at that point, how did it proceed? From yeah, go ahead, John.
You mentioned that, but they had funding that they could provide money for cover crops for any landowners in the Peno watershed. I think, wasn't it 40 acres How we started?
Yeah,
Or something like that per individual
yeah,
that you could furnish seed for?
Yep.
And then it was the landowner's responsibility to apply the seed, and you know, that's kind of how it started. And as he said, every year it kind of grew. The first year, you know, it was just kind of a word of mouth. Had a list, you know, sent out some flyers and so forth. But you know, and then next year the neighbor seen what that guy was doing, and it just kind of built on that and word of mouth. And of course, you got a cover crop growing along the road that people aren't used to, and you know, that kind of strikes a conversation along the highway in the winter and early spring to see something green instead of, you know, brown with stalks. And you know, so that's kind of how it got started. And then as we progressed into the second and third year, while we kind of expanded it into a neighboring watershed, which is Scherder Creek watershed, which is several times larger than Peno, and it involves more of Pike and neighboring Rawls County. And as we done that, that seemed to really get a lot more interest too, to expand that a little bit. And you know, that's kind of how it got started.
Mhm. So John and Curtis, how is it? You took a pretty strong leadership role, as I recall from other conversations. You know, it wasn't just flyers; it was a lot of conversation. How has it impacted you not only to keep increasing your use of the practices you want to use, but also talk about them? Like, what have you had to give or step into, and maybe what did you get back? Maybe a simpler way to ask that is, did it feel weird to suddenly, like, was it hard to step out and start talking about it with your neighbors, or was it natural?
No, not so much for me. But you know, I'm not had a lifetime of conventional farming, so it wasn't anything. I was new as it was to the farm, so I don't know. Like, I'm not going to speak for John. But
No, it really, I mean, I'm a little apprehensive at first. I'm really not a big public speaker and don't, you know, really care to tell other people how to do their business. But through I guess, example, and you know, I was more than willing to try it myself, and it worked. I wasn't afraid to let somebody know. And you know, we've had a couple of workshops on the farm over the years, and you know, kind of showing people what we're doing, and happy to do that. You know, of course, when you do that, you got a lot of friends that come, and plus you got new faces you meet. So I mean, it's was not near as uncomfortable as I thought it would be. And you know, if you got something you really believe in and you just kind of tell your story, it's not as if you got to get up and give a speech to somebody. You're telling what you think, and other people are interested in it. So they, you know, have similar interests, and so they have questions. And you know, it's not always the right thing you do every time. And this was definitely a learning curve for us. You know, and every year as we do it, seems, you know, get a little easier, but we still definitely got obstacles, you know, with, you know, cover crops for corn. And for instance, you know, I've been trying different roads to plant into corn into cover crops, and I'm not having a terrible lot of success as compared with the soybeans. So it's a learning curve all the way through. And I always look to go to other meetings and find people that's got more experience than I do to, you know, kind of help me through this. So it's, you know, you got to learn as you go.
Yeah. So since you started this initiative, have you had people come to you and ask those kind of questions, John and Curtis? Like, just casually, besides the events, do people take you aside and?
Some, not a lot. I mean, I was really kind of surprised, like with the Leopold thing, how many people seen, but you know, I didn't have a lot of comments just in the public. Oh, I heard you got this award, you know, which there's a few, but you know, I thought there would be more of that, but I was kind of surprised there wasn't more recognition from the local people. You know, I had people call me that lived long ways away and say, hey, I heard about this award, you know, and congratulations, you know, thank you, you know, but next door neighbor didn't say a word. So it's kind of odd sometimes how some of those things go, you know.
Yeah. Like I said earlier, John, you and Sandy were part of and Chris and Sherry have also been part of all the Fishers and Farmers workshops. I saw you really change from the first workshop going forward. Will you talk a little bit about how meeting people at those multi-day workshops made a difference for you?
Yeah, I guess the first meeting we had, maybe it was at the one in Iowa, I guess, at the, I can't remember the name of the facility, but anyway,
Yeah.
I had never been to that type of a meeting. Most meetings you go, there's a speaker and they kind of sit and give you their spiel, and then you can ask questions. Well, this roundtable that you all had was, when we first started, I looked at Sandy and said, I don't know what we've got into here. This is going to work or not. But as it went and got everybody involved and you got a little more familiar with the people around you, it kept you more involved and made you think. And that, I guess I got more comfortable as the day went on and as that meeting went on. So by the second one, I was kind of prepared and kind of knew what to look for. And you kind of pick out people that, man, this guy's kind of similar to what I'm doing. I need to talk to him and see what he's doing about this, So I think that networking where you actually, I guess you could say you kind of forced us to interact with the rest of the crowd, is there's something to be said for that. That was a different experience. And it turned out, I think it was good,
Did it make anything easier when you got home, like working on the local project?
Oh, I guess somewhat it made you look probably at the bigger picture and to kind of question things you were doing or things that people said, just because somebody mentioned it, that don't mean it's a fact. You kind of forced you to kind of look and research for yourself. Well, is that right or not? And you get 2 or 3 more people, similar experiences that they voice their part of it too. So I guess it reinforces maybe some of your thinking with something like that.
Mm-hmm. Let's take a minute to talk about what's resulted from what you've been doing. A little bit, just look at simple numbers and what kind of progress you're seeing. Any one of you want to jump in and speak to that?
So I can talk a little bit. Before we ever got started in the project, 2009, we did a full assessment of the aquatic community within Peno Creek, looking at fish, mussels, crayfish, and aquatic habitat. As you would say, a pre-impact type of study, or just getting the current status. In 2018, we went back and did a very similar study just to compare it. Now, obviously, in 10 years or 9 years, we're not going to reverse 200 years worth of changes, but we did see slight improvements in some of the metrics we looked at, that overall watershed health. And so it's still really early, and it's going to take a long time for those to really move one way or the other. But the early signs were good that we're seeing the aquatic community respond positively to some of the things we've been doing. And then through our cover crop program, where we were providing seed, the whole intention with the cover crop program, especially when we started in 2013 and 14, was severalfold. But it was mainly to plant the seed. It's probably cliche in this situation, but it was literally to get these guys some seed and see how they can work it into their operation. We didn't attach a lot of strings to it like many government programs. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was just, here's some seed. And at that time, even the seed was kind of hard to get in some instances. So we were able to source the seed, get it to these guys and say, here, there's not a lot of strings attached to this. Just plant it, see if you can work it into your operation, and then see how it works for you. And we took that, and like I said, we grew it every year. We got to, we ended up limited each landowner to 50 acres. But, I was getting landowners calling me say, hey, I would like my 50 acres of seed, but I'm going to do another 500 on my own, or maybe 700 to 1,000 acres on my own, which was the whole goal of the program, is to let them experiment with some of this seed, see what works, and then they will naturally, if it works for them and they like the benefits of it, they will naturally progress. And we saw that in numerous instances, John being one of them, John Curtis, several other landowners really took off with it. That was really an intent of just that small amount of money through the seed that we spent to get these guys going.
Do you see that, John and Curtis, when you look around? Can you actually see a difference in the amount of cover crop?
Amount that you're putting in.
Well, the amount that we're putting in obviously is increased. I mean, of course, there's no longer a program through the conservation, but we've gone 50% of the acres probably, maybe a little more, just depending on the year and the fall and the establishment time and so forth. As far as overall in the county, we picked up a couple of producers that was doing none, and now they're doing several thousand acres. They bought the equipment to do it, and there's few that's been doing it along, and they're continuing to do it and building their acres each year. So overall, yeah, you go down the road this spring, you'll see more green by far than we used to. Not near enough, but it's there's a couple of real good producers in Rawls County that got started with the Scherder Creek thing. They're doing quite a bit. It's I don't know if there's any hard numbers that we could find of how many acres it is, but overall, I'm guessing we're increasing 15 to 20% in the acres every year would be my guess.
That's good news. You mentioned funding earlier, and several of the guests we've had on this program have received funding from Fishers and Farmers Partnership, and you guys are one of them. I believe it was the money that you used for the seed in part, but can you speak to the difference between this kind of funding and some of the other sources, and if that made a difference for you?
Yeah, I can speak to a little bit. And that was one of the questions from the very beginning when we met with everybody. It's like, all right, where's the money going to come from? And I didn't know at that time. I knew I had my support in my agency, and I knew there were different programs out there, but it's always easier and better to ask for money if you have an idea how you're going to spend that money. And so that was part of it. We did that. We used the Fishers and Farmers money because we could develop our own ideas, our own mission that we wanted to use the money for, and then kind of really did not have a lot of strings attached to that money. We had some sideboards we had to stay within, but as with many government programs, there is a whole laundry list of, bullet points you have to hit to qualify for the money or how you could spend the money. And it gets really burdensome as with a lot of government programs. And so this money had some of those strings, but they were much less. It was a lot easier to use the money. And so that made our job a lot easier, where it was a simple one-page agreement when they got the seed, and that's all they had to fill out was just a one-page agreement when we got them the seed. So that made my life a lot easier. It made the producers' life a lot easier, just because we didn't have to jump through all the hoops like we do with a lot of other programs.
Mm-hmm.
I'll follow up on that a little bit, Nancy.
Mm-hmm.
Chris was right. There was not much paperwork. They signed up, they got the seed and put it on as you wish. But this initiative did get more interest in our local FSA through the state cost shares, and also the federal through the EQIP and so forth, which there is more paperwork there, more hoops to jump through and so forth. But and I think maybe Melissa Bailey is on from our FSA office. I've seen her name there a while ago, and she hopefully after a while may have a comment on what she thinks is the number of acres and stuff coming through the office. I know which our farming operation, we've used the state cost share and we've used the EQIP programs, and some of the EQIP stuff I do not completely agree with how they do it, but it's cost sharing, you do the way they want, but there is a place for funding there, and it does pay you quite well to do the practice. I mean, it's worth going after, and gives you some incentive so it's not all coming out of your pocket. And I think that's a very good idea to get people started. And I think most of these people, once they start, will continue. They may not follow exactly the federal guidelines for the seeding rates and all that, which I think, they recommend way too high seeding rates as far as I'm concerned, but still it's part of the program, and it's a good program because it does give financial assistance to producers who might not do it otherwise. And once they get started and they run through the equip, and I think they'll continue with it. So that is a good program, but I see it as what Chris and we did with the very beginning of Peno, got a lot more interest in the state and federal programs at our local level.
So it gave people a chance to try on a smaller level, just give it a go, and then you saw them into it.
Yeah, because we'd heard horror stories of guys going way too big, way too fast, and then having issues, and then they were done with it. And I don't blame them. If you would have your farm in the first year and it didn't do what you thought it was going to do, you're not going to want to touch it again. So we intentionally started small, let them work into maybe half a field or a quarter of a field, and then go from there.
So what's the status of things now?
So we've received 2 grants for Fishers and Farmers. And very grateful for both of those. And we've spent all that money. And so we were tying that project up at the end of, at the beginning of 2020. And then COVID kind of hit, and we've basically been in a pause ever since, just because we don't have any additional extra funding at this time. It's probably the point where we need to revisit some of our original ideas and discuss different things that we see now, things that have changed over the past, 8 years now, and then see what's next for us. And so with COVID, it's really tough to get in a room together right now with a bunch of people. And so I think John and I have talked, and since I've got promoted, I have a new fishery biologist that's going to be in my old position. He just started yesterday, so I'm getting him trained up. And so by the time I think I get him trained up and ready to go, hopefully this summer, maybe in the fall, we'll be ready to go where we get back in the room together and have some of the same type of regional discussions and see where we go from here. But I think our template, even though we stumbled on it, since we didn't know what we were doing, we didn't have a real solid agenda for what we wanted to do. I still think that's very valuable. Instead of me or Sherry or somebody else coming up with some ideas and trying to push them, I think we're all better served if we all get together with the producers and some agency folks and see where we can, where we have common ground and things we can work on together. I just think there's real value in just the general buy-in with that, and you get a better product in the end.
So to end this part of our conversation today, Sherry, I have a question for you.
Okay.
How does this local work change things beyond the boundaries of Peno Creek watershed? Both in your in the social, your organizations, also on the land, in the water.
Yeah, it really gave us a chance to partner with landowners and try something new and different. It also was one of the very first early cover crop grants that the Fishers and Farmers Steering Committee approved for the 5-state basin area, and we've approved several more since then. So cover crops are growing in popularity. Our support of those through funding has grown, and it's given us a chance to, we've talked already today about telling stories. It's given us a chance to tell a different story, to showcase some really awesome landowners and the work that they're doing and how we've become partners with them. So I think it's really brought us all together.
Okay, well, thank you. We're perfectly timed today. It's wonderful. We moved to our breakout groups now, so you all have a chance to talk about this with others. I want you to pull out that piece of paper you had and use those 3 columns in this conversation. Sharing what you with each other in the group, what you jotted down. And then column 3 will be, what do we do then? We're not asking you to come up for exact solutions for this group, but when COVID comes and you can't meet, when somebody changes jobs, if your leader in a local group moves away, if funding runs out, it happened. I am confident everybody on this call has had those things happen. So we want you just to think together in your group about what are things you can do. And so here's the logistics. Amy is going to automatically put you in groups. Before you go, look in the chat and write down the question. When the work ends, when funding runs out, all those things, what can you do to keep it going? So be sure you have that. You cannot see the chat once you get into the little small group. You'll have 10 minutes to chat in the breakout, quickly introduce yourselves and hop to it. For simplicity, Amy is going to read a list of people who will be the group leaders and do the report out. So this is just to speed things along so you know who's taking notes and who's going to speak. And Amy may pop into your group just to take a photograph, so don't be alarmed if that happens.
Now this is a good time. Everybody can turn themselves off mute, turn your videos on. We'll send you into breakout rooms. Make it a very, very short and sweet introduction of yourselves. Just quickly go around the room, do a little introduction, and then move on to the question. Choose, oh, we're not choosing leaders. I'm saying who the leaders are. Okay, so in group 1, Terry Spence, you are the leader. In group 2, Brad McKee. Group 3, Rachel Curry. And group 4, Bartlett Durand. I'm sorry if I butchered your names. So I'll move everybody into breakout rooms now. So again, make sure you're off mute, turn your video on, and have an open conversation. Here we go.
Hello. Hi. All right. Oh, we got Amy too. We win.
Yes, you are the winning group. I don't know what you win yet, but I'm going to turn my video off, you guys. So just feel free to have the open conversation.
Cool. All right. Well, let's run around, do introductions quickly. Here's what I want us to do. I want to talk about, who you are, represent what your background is, or something about what we see in your camera there. And then we'll go from there. So I'm Bartlett Durand. I'm actually the Director of Water Quality Partnerships for Sand County Foundation. I didn't know you guys were LCA award winners. Congratulations. That is awesome. I almost fell out of my chair when they started with that LCA video. That's fantastic. So I was delighted to see that, and nice to meet you. My background is actually Sand County Almanac. I can't remember the name of the artist. It's the original painting of one of the most famous Aldo Leopold related, I think it's Marshland Elegy, that's it. And one of the most famous paintings associated with all that, and it hangs in our office. So since I can't be in my office, I took a picture to remind everyone that we have this direct connection to wetlands and Aldo Leopold. So there we go. Ryan, you want to introduce yourself next, please?
Yep, absolutely. My name is Ryan Toot. I'm a watershed forestry specialist for the U.S. Forest Service for state and private forestry. So we work with state and nonprofit partners. I'm also a steering committee member of Fishers and Farmers. Yeah, and I've been in this position since 2019, so I'm fairly new to it as well. My background is the view from a road near some family property that I have over in Wisconsin in Burnett County. So that's county land, and a nice little wetland over there in the fall.
Nice, very nice. Becky.
My name is Becky Taylor. I'm the resource conservationist with the Livingston County Soil and Water Conservation District in Illinois. We do have a pretty good watershed project going on with the Vermilion Headwaters watershed project. It grew out of the Indian Creek watershed project, which was an award-winning project, but that was before I started. And then my background, I'm at home. I don't have anything fun in the background other than you might see some cow figurines, even though they are the wrong kind of cows, but that's the only kind you can find to buy. I grew up raising registered Herefords, so you don't find those very often.
Do you still farm?
Our family was not able to keep the farm because it was all rented land, but.
Okay. All right. And the Scherder gentleman, and we lost the granddaughter or daughter. That was disappointing.
Yeah, she's kind of in and out. She's hard to hold.
That would be our backdrop.
That was your background, right? That's awesome. Well, it's delighted to meet you guys and everybody else here. So they want us to rock in. But before we do, first question I had that I wanted you, the Scherders, to answer is at that first meeting that I think it was Chris held, why did you go? I'm always interested in the 0 to 1.
Free meal.
Was it really? Literally?
Yeah, well, it was free. I don't remember if we had I think maybe pizza. I don't remember for sure. But it was very informal, and, and that didn't help, to encourage some people to come in, a free meal. And only thing better if we'd had some beer, but struck an interest in what Curtis and I was wanting to do on the farm anyway. Probably why we got started or why we went.
Okay. So in my work, and I'm actually I'm trying to set up watershed partnerships between municipalities and farmers as a different income stream coming in. Missouri doesn't quite have the trading program in place, but hopefully we're coming that way. But one key development I'm pushing is farmers being an equal partner at the table. What you often see is somebody coming in and trying to find 1 or 2 farmers and basically bribing them or paying them to change practices and then go, oh, we meet our permit. And instead getting farmers to sit at the table and help be part of the solution. That sounds what this kind of is to me.
That's kind of what it was. I think, kind of looked for a few guys that was doing some cover crop and had been doing quite a bit of no-till. And, because it seemed like people with the no-till are more interested in the cover crop than the conventional guys. So get somebody that's already doing some things and, throw some ideas off each other, because, even 2 or 3 years more experience, at the beginning of the game makes a lot of difference, as far as getting into a cover crop or getting into a no-till farming situation, with the rotation and, what cover crops you're going to use, and, how you going to get rid of the cover crops, with chemical or mechanical or whatever. If you're just coming into this, that's all kind of big questions, something you're really not familiar with. So the more get at least the 2 or 3 guys that's got some experience into that, is very important, where you go in and you got somebody you can feed off of,
Right.
You got a neighbor I know, he done 300 or 400 acres of cover crop last year. Well, he planted green, I said, my gosh, that's scared to death to plant green. I've never tried that before. And, just things like that to kind of break the ice and get you a little more comfortable in your own operation.
Sure. So, Curtis, let me pitch this one to you. If the funding stopped, the cost share stopped, what happens?
Well, you keep doing it. The ones that are interested in bettering the ground and that movement to keep it better for the next generation, that succession they're going to keep doing it. In my opinion, there's a lot of guys that aren't going to do it unless there's funding. It's good. It can't cost them money. They're not going to try it. If it's going to cost you money, you're just going to stay away from it. But if it's free or you make a little bit on top of it, yeah, what the heck, let's give it a go. So I really don't have a good answer for that. It's, it's going to be a 50-50. Half the people are going to do it and half are not.
Hmm. So maybe this is a question either for Becky or Ryan. So the conceit that we have is that once people adopt no-till cover crop, a new system, we're helping them get over the hump, but once they're there, it should be self-evident that it makes sense.
It should be, but there's always going to be those ones that, for whatever reason, go back to the way they were before. Maybe they had, a year like we've had in the last couple of years where either they couldn't get the cover crops in on time, or they had a hard time terminating them to where they see, it seems like, every year maybe they had an issue, they had a challenge, and it turns them off of the cover crops, even though they may see that their yields are not suffering and they're having other positives, they may just focus on the negatives. And so we do have some that will take it and be like, you know what, I've been in this, let's say the CSP program through NRCS. I've been in there for 5 years. I've done cover crops. I've done no-till. I see the benefit. We have others that could go through that same program and because of other challenges, not see the benefit.
Sure.
So it is a toss-up. Our hope is that they will take it and just see the benefits and continue.
Right. You said your program, Becky, started out as a small watershed and then grew into a larger neighboring watershed or a combined watershed?
Yeah, it started out as the Indian Creek, which was 3 Huck 12s, and now we have, it was 3 smaller watersheds, and now it's 12 smaller watersheds. And it's one of the high nitrate loading watersheds in Illinois. So
that's what kind of gives the incentive into what watersheds coming in is by the amount of need.
Yeah. And we focused, so the whole, if we looked at the whole river watershed for the Vermilion River, it would take up most of my county. So we focused on a smaller part of it, just for scale purposes. And in Illinois, our priority watersheds are the ones that either load either nitrates or phosphorus into the water system.
Transported.
How will I know when everyone's back, Amy?
I will tell you, everyone's working their way back right now.
Okay.
But I think everyone is back.
Okay. Welcome back. I hope you had a productive conversation. Our focus is, what do you do when things stop, pause, turn upside down, something happens? Group number 1, Amy, who was the spokesman?
Terry Spence. Terry, go for it.
Terry's on mute.
Yeah, he's coming.
I'm coming. I'm having a difficulty here today. I would rather Sherry kind of filter out what we've talked about. I didn't get quite all the notes.
Okay, so you're delegating your authority, Terry. I got it.
I am.
Okay, we talked about some ideas for keeping the work alive, being finding other sources for funding, but not just focusing on the funding. The importance of revisiting your shared goals, like Chris had talked about, we take the opportunity to do. How it's important to always have one beating the drum or sending out that messaging. So it's always on people's mind. We should, in Peno, take the opportunity to showcase our successes and talk about what we've achieved so far to help gain more interest, and not just on like the water quality or the fisheries side, but for like John and Curtis to be able to have conversations with other producers and talk about changes they've seen in production or profits. But then also being kind and gentle with ourselves and acknowledging that these things take time. And then we ended out our time talking about the importance of partnerships, giving some strategic thought to who do we need to connect with, who's not been a part of the conversation before, and how to go about that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sherry.
You're welcome.
Group 2, Brad McKee. Go for it, Brad. Doesn't look like Brad's on anymore. He must have got kicked off. Anyone else from group 2 want to step up, please?
We nominated Brent. Brent's on mute.
Okay.
I think on the slowdown, we talked about COVID, but how that just kind of stopped things in meetings and stuff like that. But it's also been a benefit with technology with Zoom and these meetings, Nancy, that you've, with Fishers and Farmers, bringing people together. And today with snow and stuff, I wouldn't be able to travel today and stuff much, but I think something that started slowing us down is actually maybe going to help us connect with more people and reach out further by using technology and things like that and bringing more people together. So on the slowdown, I think it slowed us down a little bit, but I think we're coming back stronger and better and stuff like that. So, and then plus John has a great story to tell, and he's done a great job of doing that. And I'm just thrilled to see the success that Peno Creek and Spencer Creek is drawing to the area.
Cool, thank you.
All right, next up, group 3, Rachel Curry. You're on mute, Rachel, but we're ready for you.
Dang it. All right, thank you. So our group talked about the importance of technology, whether it's, doing your meetings through Zoom or using the phone or using other things like Dropbox to be able to send and sign forms, while still trying to find ways to meet in a manner of face-to-face, obviously not directly face-to-face, but trying to continue to keep that relationship. But with our use of technology, it makes it difficult to have those critical conversations. But we can also use this kind of downtime to prepare and to continue to look for connections with different people and finding the quote unquote right people that would be willing to try something new, as well as to be open about their successes as well as their struggles. And we kind of just came down to the fact that we're always going to face these obstacles, whether it's a pandemic or, whatever it is. But we need to remember that we've got to continue and we've got to remain flexible.
Thank you.
Okay, and last but not least, Bartlett Durand.
Hi, we were lucky enough to have the Scherders in our group. So we got a little off the rails just talking to them, and it was awesome. But I will say that our key thing is what happens when the funding ends for these things. And I'm actually going to lean on Curtis on this one. He said something in passing. He said, well, the funding's there. It's probably a 50-50 whether people keep going, unless they're like us and are thinking about the future and thinking about soil health and thinking about all these other things for the long-term farming perspective. And that resonated with me really strongly with some other work we've done in particular. So there will always be those, and I can't remember if it was Ryan or one of the Scherders who said this, but some people chase the money, or they'll do it because you give them money, but that's just the way they are. But you start converting people to the soil health messaging and the idea of longer term and what you're doing with the land. And that's where money is just a piece of the puzzle. It doesn't become the end all be all. And I think that's the most important takeaway is getting the psychology, getting the ethic, getting whatever it is deeper ingrained, not just, hey, here's some cost share, go out and do something for me.
Thank you. Sounds like the conversations had similar themes, but went some different directions. I had an interesting conversation last week with John Aaron, who's a farmer in Northwest Wisconsin. I'm part of this network. And like you all, he has done a lot of work building local initiatives and keeping them going. And they hit a tough spot too during the pandemic. And he used the illustration of a fire. He said you use kindling to start the fire or a project. You use softwood to get it going and hardwood to keep it burning for the long haul, which is pretty much what you just said, Bartlett. He said you can't dump the fuel all on at once up front, or you blow out the fire and you have nothing left. So his point was there's a balance between enthusiasm and the hard work and maybe the natural pause that comes now and then just so people can regroup. And I would add to that I think the fire burns longer and the work is more fun if in those pauses or in those times we come together with people and make those choices together and actually say, you know, what are our next wise steps and how can we do them together so we're not out there trying to haul the load by ourselves. So this is our transition moment to the Q&A. Some people drop off around now just because of time constraints. So I'd like to ask you all to put yourselves in gallery view so you can see everyone on the call. And just take a look at these folks. This is your network. These are people who are all in some way or another dealing with the same things you are, looking for creative outlets, looking for stamina and new ideas. So you represent all 5 states of the upper Mississippi River Basin and some beyond. And we just thank you for coming and we encourage you to stick together going forward. So just for those of you who may take off, I want to mention next month's program. On March 18th, we will have Dodge County Farmers for Healthy Soil and Water and Dodge County Alliance for Healthy Soil and Water, 2 groups that are working together north of Madison, Wisconsin. So join us. We'll be here the 3rd Thursday of every month at 1 o'clock. So Q&A time. Amy, are there questions in the chat?
There was one question and one comment.
Okay.
We'll start with the comment because it's a very nice one for the Scherders. I just gotta find it. It is from Dan Zer. He's with the UW Extension here in Wisconsin. It says, sadly, I can't stay, but kudos to all of you for putting this on, and thanks to the Scherder family for doing what they're doing and for being willing to share their story with other farmers on their farm and at events. Farmers becoming teachers is a big part of how we scale up regenerative ag practices. I thought that was nice. And then the question is, why did the farmers even show up? What attracted them to the meeting, that first initial meeting?
I would say free dinner. So it was a direct invite to civic folks that a list that I sat down with NRCS and Soil and Water District, that folks that were more open to these type of ideas. And so it wasn't just a newspaper ad or anything that invited people. So we sent them a letter and then we followed up with a phone call trying to explain a little bit more what we were doing. So so that is how we kind of directed that, marketed that a little bit. And I think, and John and Curtis may be able to answer this better why they showed up, but we targeted folks that we knew would more than likely be willing to work with us. So it wasn't just a broad thing.
There's another question and it says, does the Peno River watershed have a farmer group? Or is the work done on an individual basis with an administrator from soil or water conservation or similar agency?
So we have the Peno Cooperative Partnership, which is a blend of agency staff and producers. So it's kind of a farmer group, but there's also members of Missouri Department of Conservation, NRCS, and the Pike County Soil and Water District on it as well.
Don and Curtis, do you have anything to add on that?
I'd add on to what Chris said about getting people to the meeting. I commented, I think, to Bartlett a while ago, the free meal didn't hurt, but they did pinpoint people that they knew had been doing no-till and had got some experience with cover crop. I think that's very important to have somebody there, that's had a little background, and everybody that's there is not new and trying something new that nobody really knew anything about. So I think that experience involved in it, and also the personal invitation. I mean, somebody sends you a notice and then calls you up, you're way more likely to go than if you got a letter and threw it on your desk. Well, I'll go if I get time, but you got that follow-up call initially is very important.
There are no more questions in the chat. So if everybody wants, you guys can take your mute off. This is a casual conversation. Ask questions at will. Bartlett, your hand is up. I saw you raise your hand. I didn't know if you did that on purpose.
I did that on purpose. You can't
All
keep me down. So I asked about that farmer-led watershed group in Wisconsin. The DATCAP, Department of Ag, has started a funding source for producers to lead their own groups about water quality, and we're seeing great progress made. All of us non-farmers, even with farming backgrounds, don't have the same weight of John or Curtis talking to their neighbors. I heard John talk about once they got going and there was green, I think you did it out of necessity, and then there's green in the field in spring and neighbors would stop by, like, that's different. That's where I believe change happens, when you see it and you have that casual interaction. So I'm just wondering if that's not something we promote in general. Now, it's like saying, I run a factory and I want the union to come in. It's generally you're giving power away, but in this situation, the farmers are everything. Right. And so I'm just wondering, I guess I'm just asking for reactions about that, either actively funding farmer groups, or how do we empower or build more of these social groups among farmers? I don't know who that's directed to. It's just kind of a general.
I will say one thing. I have my eye on farmer-led group. That's really our core focus but those local initiatives can look so different in different places. And that's natural and probably healthy. But I have noticed that since DATCAP, which is the Department of Ag in Wisconsin, started specifically funding projects that are led by farmer-led groups, more of them popped up. Like, there are many, many, many more than there were before the money was there. So it's been inspiring, and then of course it builds on itself.
Yeah, I was just going to mention Fishers and Farmers does support farmer-led groups across all 5 states. So we do fund farmer-led groups. The first farmer-led group we ever worked with was down in the Burbis-Merrimack down in Missouri. So we learned from that very first watershed group, the farmer group, and we took what we learned there, and we have funded farmer-led groups in all 5 states. So we're really excited to see when DATCAP started funding farmer-led groups, we were really excited to see that. And we were hoping to bring that to some of the other states. A more robust program. Consistent funding is what we would like to see, for watershed coordinators to have that consistent leadership, because what we've seen, there isn't always a lack of money, but to have that consistent leadership. And I know some of our folks that are attending today are working on that in their own states. But I just wanted to mention Fishers and Farmers has been funding some of those groups. And you can visit our website to see the groups that we've funded.
Yeah, if you guys look in the chat, Peno Creek is one of the groups featured on the site. So there's a link in the chat. You can check them out directly.
This is Terry. I think one thing John touched on today that really brings home to me, besides, just, doing the seeding and this and that, it was more profitable to you also, but also, you're building your soil for generations that follow you. And I think that is a key element there, that, you're doing it. Funding is good, but you also have a purpose of, sustaining the ground for your children, your grandchildren, and the future to go on. That's kind of my take on
it. This is Jack Bauer. I'm kind of to Bartlett's question about how do we keep it going. The virtual forum where anybody can host a meeting. Yesterday, I sat in on a Heron Lake Watershed District Board meeting, which I would never drive to and go to, but we had a informational message to share with the district supervisors. So invite yourself or ask, about participating in any Zoom or virtual meeting. We realize that there's some controls where you can't access this type of format, but obviously during this pandemic, it's working well and people are accelerating their knowledge on whether it's soil health or fish habitat. It's there. That's, I think, part of what Fishers and Farmers tried to achieve with the boots on the ground, is having a mechanism like this today to share information across the basin, across the, wherever you want to go.
I have a question for John and Curtis. Kind of related to what Bartlett said about a strong farmer-led core of the group, which you guys have had. You've met over time, though there's been this recent pause. Like, what do you think would make a difference in making that happen more easily?
You mean a rekindling of our group?
Yeah, just with your neighbors. Like, we hosted a Watershed Leaders Network workshop in Hannibal. John and Sandy helped organize it. Did that make any difference? You had a lot of people there from your local area. Did that make a difference?
I think it did. I think at least in our area, which I mentioned a while ago, is it got people that was doing it maybe through our watershed, got them interested in sourcing some state and federal funds to expand what they was doing. And, I know several people that no longer mess with trying to get an equip or something. They just do it. When you do it on your own, you can customize it how you want it. You can do the seeding rates you want. You can do whatever you want without having to jump through loopholes. And that is a little bit of an issue with some people, that they don't like to follow all the guidelines of some of the federal programs and stuff. And I think I mentioned this too before. Some of the federal programs, I think, are about 4 years behind where they should be on seeding rates and requirements. I think that's keeping a few people out, and it gets a few people in trouble because they do these huge seeding rates and then they cannot seed into it because they have too much cover, the ground won't dry out and so forth. So I don't know if this group could have anything to do with changing how all those federal programs are run, or who does the requirements on, but that's kind of as far as I'm concerned, they're kind of going against what we're trying to do. They're getting people in trouble because they're asking them to do things that don't work on the farm. That's just my 2 cents worth anyway. Can anybody hear me?
Yeah, we heard you.
Yes.
Okay.
If anyone else has another question. Brent Hare is here, and he lives not so very far from Scherder's. And I know, Brent, you've done a lot of work in your area to work on the landscape, work on your farm, work to get people involved. You've been on the Drainage Commission, and Maybe could you speak a little bit to the challenges you face trying to get people involved? What are the barriers you've experienced?
Well, John kind of mentioned a little bit ago on sometime state or federal standards, sometime just meeting with the right people is, you can do that, but then some of the challenges like sedimentation in our river systems, we have climate issues, we have heavy rainfall events and things like that that cause major economic damages. And a lot of these things are almost too big to address locally and even statewide, and they're kind of national issues, but the only way they're going to be addressed if we get everyone in the room talking about how to reduce some of the cost of these big damaging things, whether it's stream bank erosion, runoff. All these things contribute to a lot of major challenges that we all are dealing with. And so just having forums that you can speak about them helps build the narrative to even try to address some of these problems. You know, it's when John and remember talking about Peno Creek, it's the same thing that we're talking about on the big rivers and even smaller creeks than Peno Creek. A lot of the issues are the same, but just how do we address it with neighbors and community and stuff like that to keep when things degrade, whatever the reason, you have to look at what is being done and what can be done. I mean, we talked about the fish is an indicator of what is happening in watersheds, water quality, and all that stuff. And so, it's how do you take those indicators and slow the damage, stop the damage, reverse the damage is all what we're trying to do. And having forums where we can talk about it is very important. And every time we have a chance, I know John gets passionate when he talks about his farm and his family and the future, because that's what's important to all of us, is looking back, but then also looking to the future and how do we make things better. And MDC has done a lot of things that have really helped promoting and stuff. And just this project, it talks about reaching out, doing things that's never been done before, is a big deal when you're talking how to change things and how to move forward, because some of the things aren't being addressed, but then some of the things that are being addressed are being addressed well and stuff like that. And it's talking about the successes. And Chris mentioned it, looking at like Peno Creek, the things, instead of going after all the things that are, have really challenges, you got to be balanced to look at the things and look at broadly and things like that. And I applaud MDC of doing that, because like they said, we're stewards and we're here for a short time in the big scheme of things, but all of us have that interest is looking forward. And when I say making things better, somebody might have a different opinion and stuff, but how do we talk about that and work on the things that we can get done and things like that? Because a lot of these things have monetary values on by not doing anything, and addressing them in a way that it might be only 25% or 50% that we can get back, but it's worth doing that.
I see there a lot of people who are left on the call in this conversation are in agencies and are leading initiatives and so forth. And I would love to hear from Curtis, John, Brent, others who are Terry, people who are farming. What kind of support for creating these local forums that you just mentioned, Brent, or the farmer-led group do you need? What do you think would work, and how could you get better help with developing that little kernel of activity, that group of people who kind of keep things going?
That's kind of a hard question to answer. I'm not sure throwing money at it is yes, everything costs a little something to do something, but as far as getting the farmers involved, it's almost the more one-on-one you can get. I'm not a real big tech guy, so I'm more of a one-on-one guy. I think when we had our field day and stuff, and got a lot of farmers together, you actually seen what was going on, and that's what you need is a hands-on to really get farmers to ask questions. Say, I think this will work on my farm. Nothing against what we're doing here, but you look at the people involved. 10% are farmers, and farmers are the ones that's got to do this. But we got to have you folks involved too to help, get it statewide, nationwide, regionally. Everybody's got to be involved and work together. But the secret to the whole thing is, how do you get more guys that actually plant the seed and hold the stream banks in check and plant the cover crops and do the no-till? How do you get those people to do it? And personally, I think the one-on-one, through a field day, and you got something that's successful. Chris and I talked that before. Get a group of 10 or 15 local guys together. Have some pizza and beer, come in the evening, and tour what this guy's done, and have kind of a round table, very informal discussion. I think that's an important way to do it. I mean, it's obviously very local, but every little group has the same problem. You get more organizational people there than you do farmers. That's always been the issue. How do you get more farmers there? Farmers, are an independent group. They, not the favorite thing to do is go to a meeting, but they do like, say, hey, how'd you do this? Some interaction. What worked, what didn't work. I've had some failures last spring that you probably don't want to talk about in public because it's not going to encourage people, but you're going to have those things. So you got to talk about that. Say, hey, you're going to have this issue, or what did I do wrong? How come, should I have done this instead of that? If I talk to 3 or 4 producers that's more experienced than me, they say, well, we had that issue, but we did this. I think as far as farmers' involvement, I think that is the way you're going to get the most people involved, rather than through conferences like this. You got to do it because you can't meet, but this is all going to be over. And if we can get a plan together, kind of go back to what worked, I think, which Nancy's been involved in a lot of these field days through all the different organizations, and there's some failures but a lot of successes, and it's just neighbor to neighbor, I think, is the best word of mouth.
We've just done a survey of people doing this work on the ground, and you could have been right in the middle of them. We're hearing the pizza and beer specifically is one of the biggest things we've heard. Casual gatherings where you can bring your kids, or in your case, your grandkids, to let them see other farmers interacting casually, but talking about some of these conservation programs without us. With respect to my colleagues on the thing.
I disagree with that. I don't say without you. I think you need to be involved in these also, not run the show, but be there as an interactor.
Right.
I think that's great. I mean, this is not all going to get done without support from all of your groups, because, for one thing, you've got an access to funding that a farmer doesn't have himself, and a way to spread the word and take it to different regions. I don't think we need to eliminate your all's whoever organization you're in, you just need to be involved but not run the show.
That's right. You're absolutely right.
Anyone else have a thought to share? That seems like a good note to end on. It's almost 2:30. Okay, thank you so much for joining us today. Like I said, our featured guests next month on March 18th, Thursday at 1 o'clock, are two groups from Dodge County, Wisconsin, including a lake association and a very strong farmer group that's also working in cover crops and getting great participation. Also on Saturday, be sure you tune in to hear Fishers and Farmers Neighbor to Neighbor, the live stream radio program. It's on at 9:05 Saturday. You can go to our website and click through to hear the live stream, and then it's available after the broadcast there as a podcast anytime. So hope you'll do that. That program is about the SWCD in Polk County, Iowa, which is the county where Des Moines is. It's half rural, half urban, and they are moving things along much quicker than in the past with some new strategies, and they're pretty excited about it. So it's a good program. So I hope you'll do that, and we'll see you next month. Thank you, everyone.
Nancy.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks, Nancy.
Yeah, see you.